because I think a lot of people thought Assad was Western educated, right? He's a dentist.
Mhm.
In fact, the NGO that I used to work for that provided Syrian aid, that was, the president was a Syrian physician, and he gave his degree from the University of Damascus, handed it to Assad. He's like, he seemed like a pretty quiet, unassuming dude back then.
Mhm.
But obviously not. So a lot of people had a lot of hope that there was going to be change, and it kind of looked like there might be. And then there were some students who were working towards more pro-democracy stuff, and it started to get shut down. And then a lot of, it started to look same Assad as the old Assad, and people started to get nervous. And then the big incident that really sparked everything happened in a little town called Dara, and it was it's actually really horrific. It was a bunch of kids that started spray painting anti-government slogans, like just graffiti on the side of the wall, pro-democracy, anti-Assad. So the government came in and took these kids. Like, we're talking about kids between the ages of 12 to 17, like teenagers. And they just came and took them, and they disappeared for 3 months, and they held them and they beat them. Like, they came back injured and tortured. And so the city, I mean, imagine if it was like a small town in Texas, if kids disappeared, we'd all be protesting, right? That we wouldn't stand for that. 20 kids gone.
Yeah.
So the city starts peacefully protesting, and they do a massive sit-in, like where the entire city comes out of their homes and everyone just sits in the streets. And they continued to do these protests enough where they sent in the military, and then someone started shooting into a crowd of peaceful protesters, and that's when everything, then that lit the flame for everybody. Different cities, Homs, Dama, Damascus, Kobani, just you name the city, they were there. And it started to spread, and that's when people started to be like, and that was what the problem was, right? Then there started to be protests, and people were like, this is not okay. We can't have a government that does this. Mm-hmm. And more people started disappearing, and more people started dying. And there were a number of national protests. And then nobody else in the world really did anything. And that's where you started to see the terrorist influence, is that these groups, these organizations would go in, and nobody is helping fund these people or give them weapons. And so suddenly you've got somebody from Al-Qaeda sitting there being like, well, we have guns and we'll show you how to shoot them. And so they started to join in with the Free Syrian Army. And unfortunately, this gave the Free Syrian Army a terrible rap around the world, because then they were like, oh, well, now those guys are just terrorists, which is not. And there was huge splits within the Free Syrian Army, and there were splits between these different jihadist groups and militant organizations, because people were, are we all working towards the same goal, or is it anti-Assad? And then some people were like, no, it's pro-jihad. And they're like, wait, that's not what we signed up for. And it got very confusing. And that's kind of how everything started to go downhill. When I was working, this is just sort of related, but slanted off a little bit. When I was working for this NGO, just to give you an idea, though, the president likes to say that he had no idea what was happening, and that he was unaware of the problem. When we used to meet with the State Department to talk about the kind of medical aid that we were providing, and we had physicians come in and say, yes, they knew exactly where the hospital was, and we would get bombed directly by helicopters, and airstrikes were done right on hospitals when they knew there was a huge flag over the Al-Shabaab, building just down the road, and that place wouldn't get bombed. So just to give you an idea what the Assad regime was like. And we were telling this to State Department officials, UN people. We met with all different levels of the government. I met with Samantha Power directly, sat in the same room with her with only 5 other people. So they were absolutely aware of the terrorists on the ground. In fact, they were asking us leading questions about where they were and what they were doing. So just to give you an idea. Wow. Sorry.
Yes. That's okay.
Obviously,
one of the tragedies.
A huge place in my heart for this.
Yeah, and that's clear, and you tremendous work, and you know so much about it, and I'm glad you have an opportunity to talk about it. And if people want to go donate, they can go to the World Food Program, WFP.org, and make a donation. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I put that link up in the chat room. So if you are so inclined to go and make a donation to the World Food Program, it would go over there and help the people that Katrina has spoken so passionately about. Dave, did you have a question?
Well, I was just adding the observation that with this war, seems to be no good guys left except for the poor, refugees. And the World Food Program, I tend to have a rather skewed view of the United Nations. Is this one of the programs worth supporting just for these folks? Do they work pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, the World Food Program is, I mean, as much as we all hate the UN, look, it is mostly U.S. funded. I mean, we have a lot of say on where that money goes. And it is also one of the only organizations that can get into the areas that really need help. The organization I used to be working for was the Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS. Now, that's not food and that's not related to WFP, but they provide medical aid. Also a fantastic program that I highly recommend. They do really good work on the ground. Also, they're all like mostly Syrian Americans, so they all speak the language and they send real physicians in on the ground. Like, it's one of the riskiest operations going into Syria right now. So they're also fantastic. And that medical aid is just, I can't even tell you, they've lost 70% of their medical facilities, physicians. I mean, the people who are educated and have those kind of degrees got out of the country a long time ago.
Yeah, and that's obviously understandable, but it's certainly a situation that warrants our attention. And as much as, yes, like you said, we all dislike the UN, it's a program.
They can get places sometimes that other people can't get to, because they're the UN. It's one of those things.
People need help and they're caught in an awful situation. We have a couple of minutes left, like 2 or 3. I quickly want to mention a story out of Texas, which has a Wisconsin tie. A man named Scott Panetti was arrested and convicted of killing his in-laws in 1992, and he was scheduled to die this evening. He was on death row, and hours before the sentence was handed down, let me make sure I get this right. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals granted a stay of that execution because of his mental health issues. He's been in and out of treatment since the late 1970s when he was diagnosed with early schizophrenia and discharged from the Navy. When he killed his in-laws, he ended up defending himself at trial and wore a purple cowboy costume and attempted to subpoena more than 200 people, including Jesus Christ, John F. Kennedy, and then Pope John Paul II. It's very clear that he had some mental issues, and a group of conservatives, including, I want to make sure I get the names correct, Ken Cuccinelli, former West Virginia Attorney General, and the president of the Senate Conservatives Fund, and writer Charles Murray wrote a letter to Governor Perry asking him to commute this execution, and it's been stayed by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And as a conservative who supports a very limited application of the death penalty, I think this is the right call in this situation, because it's clear he has some mental health issues, and I don't think that granting carrying out the death sentence is the appropriate measure in this particular instance. So,
in most states, even in the old days, he would have just been locked away in a mental hospital somewhere.
Yeah, so I think that this is the right call, and I'm sure that there will be an appeal now, and it will take some time. He's been on death row since 1992, so I don't know what's going to happen after this, but they have decided to stay that execution and will appeal and do so on the grounds of his mental illness. So I said we would talk about it. I only got a chance to mention it briefly, but that is the update of this story, and I will be watching it because I do want to talk more in depth about this on a subsequent program, because I think it's an important conversation to have, and I think there'll be a lot of differing opinion in conservative circles about whether or not this is the right thing to do. So we are at the bottom of the program. I'd like to take a moment. Katrina, where can we find you?
You can find me on my blog is singlevoice.me, where I try to give you the top 3 international stories I'm watching every day, and on Twitter, Veribatim, Veribatam.
Thank you for being on the program. We can
Thanks
find
for
Dave
having
at
me.
Oh, you're very welcome. We can find Dave at Charnina53219. You can find me at Modern Comments at my blog, moderncomments.blogspot.com, and I occasionally contribute to Real Raw Right. And of course, I want to thank my producer Taylor, who you can find on Twitter at iDesertBlog.
Modern Compass Radio.
That's with an E, EYE Desert Blog. Thanks, folks, very much. Be sure to stick around for the simulcast of Right War from FTR Radio. Be sure to switch over to the FTR Radio chat if you're going to be involved there. And if you want to listen to a more stable stream, you can just listen to our stream. But outside of that, be sure to switch over to the FTR Radio chat at ftrradio.com. We'll catch you all next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Evan.
This show is copyright by VLR Media. All opinions of hosts, panelists, and guests are their own and may not reflect the opinion of VLR Media or anyone else.